So you still have family in Kentucky and Tennessee?
Tennessee and Kansas City and Austin, Texas. That's where my dad's two sisters and one brother that's left.
Do they farm?
No. Uncle Dickie, he worked in a factory job, and he's in, I think, early 70s. And my Aunt Norma, she's 86. And my Aunt Mary Lou, I think, is about 74, and she lives in Kansas City. Yeah, I've got a lot of cousins out there. I mean, my Aunt Norma and Aunt Mary Lou, yeah, they had quite a few kids, and got a lot of grandkids. And so, yeah, I've got cousins there in both places. California, just all over, really. Just
Yeah.
so.
What are some of your earliest memories that had to do with farming? And if you don't mind, I'll probably keep asking about farming.
Yeah,
Since
okay.
You've done it, and your dad has done it. And
Yeah.
have you done it your whole life? Or?
Yeah, that's all I've done. I've not worked any public works. I've just was raised on a farm and knew how to try to make a living off of through your land. Just like I told you at church there yesterday, we got some geese when I was a little kid. Oh, I don't know where that picture's at, Carolyn, but anyhow, we had a picture. My great grandparents for Easter had colored us a goose egg. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was a little kid, and we got pictures of it. But anyhow, I remember that. But anyhow, she used to have us a great big goose egg for Easter, and I remember them having those old geese, and that's why I got some. That's why I got some geese, because my great grandparents had some, and it's been fun having them around here. It's like you said, they're like a dog. They're a watchdog, I guess, because whenever you drove in, I mean, I could hear them honking whenever you drove in. So, yeah. And.
Did they hollow out the egg?
I don't, I really don't. I don't know. I mean, I was only like 3 years old, something like that. But I do remember them handing us that egg. And we only got one per family. My sister and I, it was one egg between us, and my cousins did. I've told this story, I don't know how many times. Whenever I can't take tobacco. I mean, or chewing tobacco. My dad always used to chew, and Dean Ratcliffe, he always chewed tobacco. And when I was probably 5 or 6, and they used to have those plug of tobacco where they cut it off with a knife. 5 brothers, or I don't know what the name of it was, I can't remember, but anyhow, I wanted some of that, and Dean Ratcliffe, he said, "Here, kid, I'll cut you off some." And he cut me off some, and I started to chew it. And he said, "Now you got to swallow that juice, makes it taste good." And I remember I got sicker than a dog, and I never wanted any chewing tobacco after that. And Dean, I just remember he was a good man, but he would like to torment you, and he would, them little sweat bees would come out. I remember we was harvesting wheat, and of course it was hot and sweaty, and the old sweet sweat bee would land on me, and he'd take his finger and just barely touch it, and it'd sting the shit out of you. I mean, that just, and a kid like, yeah, that's some of the things I remember.
How old were you with the tobacco?
Oh, I wasn't probably 5 or 6. I wasn't
really?
very old. No. But gee, our neighbor over here, Gary Youngblood, Dean and Dad. Gary Youngblood started. They got him started farming, and there was a Sam Haddon that they helped start farm. And of course, my dad helped me, and Gary, he still farms, and his boys farm, and so yeah, and the one fellow that we have help us still is Tom Sterling, and he started helping Dean when he was 12 years old, driving a tractor and plowing.
Yeah.
So anyhow, it still carried on from when he was 12 years old. Tom's 65 now, and he still helps me. And he said, "I've been with him all my life." And I said, "Well, that's just about true." So, and Tom's also my cousin on my mother's side. So, it's
Is it Tom that's your best friend?
Yeah, Tom Shirley. Yeah. He's like I said, his mother was a Spellman, so was my mother. They were his grandfather and my great grandfather were brothers. Mm-hmm. And I tell Tom he's more Spellman than I am. I said he's one more generation closer to him than I am. But he doesn't like to hear that. So.
He farms too.
No, he doesn't farm.
He just
No,
helps.
he just helps me. No, he's a truck driver, but now he always his dad farmed and worked at IBM but then they Rex just they had 80 acres and they still got it, and that's and they rent it out, and so that's yeah, not everybody farms that they work for them, but there's a couple of them that Gary and Sam that went into farming after they helped Dane. So
Well, now if you were farming so young, know, helping on the farm and stuff,
yeah,
as you got older and say around 14 or 16 and you're in school, how did farming hurt or help you in school? Maybe with your studies or even with socially, meeting other people, or dating and things. And
well, now my parents always, they wanted you to do good in school. My grandfather Spellring was a teacher, and he taught at Poland from 1931. He started teaching at Poland. He first started in 1928 at Fish Creek over in Owen County, but then he taught in Poland until they closed it down and moved everybody to Jackson Township, and I think that was in 68 or 69. And he had taught there over 30-some years there. And then my grandmother Trout, she was a school teacher too, and she was a math teacher, but she didn't like teaching the older kids. They weren't respectful enough, I guess, and so she went back she taught grade. At that point in time, you teach grade school or high school, whatever. If you teach high schools, and then she went back to teaching grade school. But she was a math. So yeah, I was encouraged to do good at school. And but yes, I worked when we had cattle and hogs and yeah, it was all it just was. If we got in late at night, you did your homework after that. I mean, that's.
Did you ever get in trouble in school?
For what reason? You mean just any reason?
Just any reason.
Just yeah, geez, we used to get on the school bus at 7:00 in the morning, and sometimes one year it started out we was on the bus at 7:15. And I've told Carolyn these stories. You ride the bus and you ride the bus, and GC was on there forever. And it wasn't anything not to pick on some of the kids. I mean, and one of the boys, I don't know, I got in trouble because we called him Siggy Piggy, and that got him upset. And yeah, I got a whack over Jackson Township for that. And then whenever I was a junior and a senior out at Van Buren, I had a problem that you couldn't chew gum, and I always chewed gum, and I would get whacks, and it was Class 3 citizenship because I wouldn't obey that one rule. But I kind of made up for it. I mean, I always made good grades. I was in the top 10% of the class. Of course, there was only 60 in the class, so I guess that didn't.
Or top 2.
Yeah. So anyhow, it was yeah. But yeah, I got in trouble at school. That was the minor thing. Dad always did say if you got whack at school, you get it at home. Well, I got him at school, but he didn't do that. I mean, what'd you get it for? And I said chewing gum, and that was a minor infraction, I guess. So.
And you would get graded on citizenship.
Oh yeah, you chewed gum, you got automatic. I was on the student council, and then I couldn't be on the student council because I was a Class 3 citizen, and you couldn't be on the thing. So out of my senior year that I was on the student council, I only got to sit on the student council thing 6 weeks out of the whole year. So, and I had one teacher in particular who would follow me around the school, and her name was Mary Jane Rice, and she was a good teacher. Don't get me wrong, she was a good teacher, but she would follow me around and follow me to classes, and then would see if I was chewing gum. So that was. But we had good teachers. I mean, we had good teachers. We had, and Carolyn will tell you, Tommy Dale Thompson was an excellent math teacher at Van Buren, and this Eleanor Neal, she was our English teacher, and I had her I think I had her for Latin for 2 years, and then freshman English. No, not freshman English. No, maybe it was, and then junior and senior English we had her, and she was really a great teacher. And she's like 96 or 99 now. She and her mind's as sharp as a tack.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Thompson, he's the one. He's passed away, hasn't he?
No, not Tommy Dale. No, Tommy Dale's. He's still.
I was thinking of a teacher who would. Just heard other people say that he would say, "Put your finner right here." I think Carolyn would know who that.
Maybe she knows who it is. I don't know.
But I'm not sure.
I don't know who that is, but Carolyn went out there, Van Buren longer than I did. Of course, we went to Jackson Township. You went till you was in 8th grade, and then they would transfer you out to Van Buren, and then. So we went. It used to be the 1 through 8. Well, then it got to be that you went through the 7th grade. In the 8th grade, they shipped you out there. Well, then the same year that we went out there in the 8th grade, then they moved the 7th grade too. So then Jackson Township was just 1 through 6 then at that point in time. He can tell you stories, him and Angela. And I've not talked with Angela enough to know, but now Reverend Haynes can tell you a lot of stories and about being a submariner, and I know she's got stories too. I could listen to her talk all the time. Being Scottish like that. That's just neat.
Well, the big thing that drove me on this, my grandfather he was a World War II veteran, and I remember listening to he and one of my great uncles talking and telling stories. Where we'd go to the barbershop and they'd tell stories, and I was never smart enough to record any of them. And so now that he's gone, I don't have that. And I wish I did. And a person's voice is and their stories. I think that's the real window to the soul. It's not the eyes so much. You can read a piece of writing somebody has. Where they're really expressing themselves, listen to their stories that they tell, and that's how you really get to know them. And the voice is always unique. You might see somebody. Two things about a person: the way they walk and the way they talk. And you could see somebody and you not know them, but you remember the way they walk because everybody has their own individual gait.
Yeah.
And then you recognize their voice even when you can't remember their face.
See, that brings me back a World War II story of Carolyn's dad. He was a captain. And now, see, I'm telling a story she would tell. And he had a cousin, and he saw this fellow walking down a railroad track. And just by his walk, now he's over in Europe, and he knew his cousin Bill was over there. And then was it Bill? Bill Bradshaw. And anyhow, saw him walking, and that was his cousin, and he recognized his walk going down that railroad track.
Yeah, I believe that.
Now, Carolyn's dad, he never told a lot of stories. He was in the engineer corps, and he talked about when they trying to put a bridge across one of the rivers, and he said the Germans just wait till right when we got the last thing set. He said then they blow it up, and he said when we get everything, we do it all again. He said then they blow it up, and he said until they blasted them off the other side. But the Germans would let them just get ready to cross, and then they'd blow it up. So, and Carolyn's uncle, her mother's brother, he was overseas. Carolyn's dad, there was his older, Carl, there were 6 boys in their family, and Lester, Carl, and Bill, and Bob were all in the service. Their brother, her Uncle Jess was too old. He's born in 1899. And then her other Uncle Harry had been killed in a mining accident, which that story she can tell. But then her aunt, her other uncle, her mother's brother, was overseas. And when he went over there, then he married a Dutch gal. It was Aunt Mia. And she lived in Maastricht. And Maastricht was one of the towns that were liberated first by the Allies. The rest of Netherlands was still in German hands. And Carl was in Maastricht, and Mia said that she remembers Carl getting out of a Jeep with a roll of papers in his hand and a long coat on and a winter hat, and she said, so whenever she first met Carl, she said, I've seen you before. And she said, where? And he said, yes, I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just almost unbelievable, but
it is.
Yeah.
I'll see kids, I'll see them walking down the road from the back, and I'll know if it's one of my students or not.
No kidding.
I recognize that walk, or because I don't see that well, they'd be off in a distance and I couldn't see their face. But as they would walk across the field when I was coaching, well, that's so and so.
That's so and so. Yeah, and that's yeah.
I'm gonna go back to like the high school days, or and let me ask too. Do you need a break or anything, or does the talking hurt your throat?
No, I'm all right. Sometimes my voice just gets a little bit gravelly. I mean, that's just part of what I'd had, my surgery and stuff, and chemotherapy and radiation. That's just part of it.
But,
if you want something to drink too, I can get you something to drink, Paul. If you're interested in something.
No, I'm okay.
I'm fine.
I just don't want to wear you out.
No,
I'm
I'm
a talker. I can keep going. When you were young and I guess high school or younger, did your family have family gatherings or like game days or things that you would get together and do that were fun?
Well, whenever my mom's side of the family. Now we went. Of course, that's where we went to church at, was Poland, and not every Sunday, but at least we got together on birthdays, down at my grandma's Spellrings, and of course that's where all my cousins were, and we would go down, we'd have family get-togethers, and we'd play. The boys, we'd go out and play catch, and we'd play knockout flies. That's what we did, with playing baseball or softball and baseball, and we'd go out in the pasture and play, and girls, they'd stay up at the house, and we had family get together. My one cousin Ed, who's a mechanic over here, he works on my equipment, and he doesn't remember. He was just a little bit younger. Of course, he's 50. I think he's 52. But he doesn't remember my great grandmother, who had the geese. We'd go there, on Christmas Day or maybe a couple of days after Christmas. But we'd always get together. My grandmother's side of the family, the Hunsicker side, and he doesn't remember. She always made these homemade rolls that were three. There was like there was three come up, and they was about that big around.
I know what you're talking about. You pinch off a piece of it.
Yeah, and anyhow, whenever they baked them, they put three little balls down in the thing, let them raise, and then when they come up, there was like, anyhow, that was, he didn't remember those homemade rolls that a great grandma, and then I said she always had chicken and noodles and mashed potatoes, and I said, and they make dressing, and I said, then as kids they'd have and I said, you don't remember, and Ed didn't remember. They'd go fishing for a gift. I don't know if you ever did that when you was a kid or not, but a boy would bring a boy, of course your mom and dad did it, but a boy would bring a boy's gift and a girl would bring a girl's gift, and the parents would be on one side, and you had a fishing pole, and you put a hook on the end of it, and then they drape a quilt or a blanket up in front of the door, and you push that. Then you drop your fishing line over that blanket, and they'd hook a present on there, and that was your present you got. Now, granted, they may have been a pair of gloves. It was a pair of gloves most of the time, or a sock hat, and the girls would get scarves and things like that. But that was how the Christmas thing. And Ed didn't remember that, and he was just a little bit too young, or younger than the rest of us. So, anyhow, that was one of the things at Christmas time that I remembered over there. And then on Christmas Eve, we'd always go Christmas Eve to my grandmother's Spellring's house, and she'd always have chili soup and oyster soup, and we'd come there after church, and then we'd have presents there for my grandma and grandpa's. But my great grandma, Hunsaker, her name was Luda. They called her Ludi, but anyhow, she was. When we was kids, we'd go out in the pasture, and there was a great big hickory nut tree, and she would crack the hickory nuts in the winter time. And I remember as kids, Grandpa taking the little farm old tractor with a small cart behind it, and that's what we kids did. We picked up them hickory nuts, filled that cart up, and then she would shell them out in the winter time, and then she'd crack them nuts and then get the meat out and put them in a jar, and then give them to everybody, and so they used them to bake with. And so yeah.
You don't hear many people using hickory nuts.
Oh, hickory nuts taste good. I mean, hickory nuts really have a better taste than a pecan, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sweeter taste, but it's just so damn hard to get the meat out of it. You know, I mean,
I always had a hard time finding them without a worm in them too.
Well,
and now I haven't tried it up here, but in Missouri, there would always be a pinhole.
Yeah, if you get them at the right time, and I had, a matter of fact, I planted some. There was a hickory nut tree up there at Carolyn's, where her dad's farm's at, and we took that tree down, and there was a bunch of hickory nuts there. And I did it in the fall, and I kept them, and I planted some. I'm hoping to get some of them will sprout, and I can go plant them. But yeah, they get. But I had a bunch of them, and I froze them, and that's what you got to freeze them and then get them out, and then and it kind of simulates going through the freeze and the thaw, and that's kind of what breaks them open, or dormancy, I guess. Cracks the shell, and so then if they start to sprout, and I don't know if they'll sprout, but then they'll sprout, they'll come up then. But they've got to go through that freezing process somehow. I don't know. I know there's a name for it, Paul, and I can't remember.
I know there's a bunch of hickory trees on that county line road.
Oh yeah.
And,
it was after my mom passed away, mom and dad, and he and I we was close anyhow, but I would sit down and listen to him tell his stories, and he really appreciated that. And he said, not everybody wants to listen to stories that older people want to have to tell. And he was in his 80s at that point in time, about 85. And there's things that I know that none of the other grandkids know, or some of even his kids didn't know, because they just didn't. And we was with my cousins there after my cousin Jerry passed away, and I was telling them stuff, and my cousin Carol Ann, she's 68. She said, "You listened to him, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Rest of us were too busy, I guess, to listen." I said, "I don't know," but I said I enjoyed. I'd stay down there. I'd go down and visit him. Wouldn't come home till 11 o'clock at night, and and he just. The boys, Matt had it out there the other night. They've got a book there, and I took it whenever he passed away. I mean, they want to know things you want, and it was Clay County Answers book about World War One, what the county did and what they gave them the people that had died during it and had served. And he went through there, and of course he knew this guy and that guy, and there was one, an E.M. Muncie, and he was one of his teachers in Brazil back in the 20s, because he graduated in 26. And he told me all about the people there, and he said that guy could have did anything. He could have went any place, and he wanted to stay here and help Clay County out. Yeah. And he said there was, I can't remember, one of them was the Jenkins that was a mayor, and he said those guys were scholars, and he said they could have went any place, but wanted to stay in Clay County and help the county out. And that was quite a compliment to me. Yeah. He went to. This is it's my grandpa. When he was a freshman in Brazil, to get there, you either had to drive over to Sterleyville, which is just south of here on 42, and you had to get on the train, which made a thing every day, take you up to school, or have somebody drive you back and forth up there where you got on the train. Well, his first year when he was a freshman, he stayed up there all year. And he'd come home on the weekends. But he had two jobs. He stayed at this one hotel where he got his room and board at, and his meals.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to fire their furnace, and he had to take care of their chickens because they run a little restaurant too, and they had to take care of the chickens. And they had a pool hall in the back, and they played cards there. Now, he's only a freshman. He's only
freshman in high school.
Freshman in high school.
Okay.
And then he worked at the school. He would get up early in the morning too, and he'd go and he'd help fire the boilers at Brazil High School.
Uh-huh.
And then he went to school. Well, he said he learned to shoot pool and play cards up there at St. Well, the next year, my great-grandfather, his dad, bought a car for him to drive back and forth up to school. Now, he never said anything, but I have a feeling that my great-grandfather did not particularly care for him learning how to shoot pool and to play cards up there. Now, he never said that, but I have a feeling my great-grandfather thought that wasn't maybe the, how do you want to put it, the thing for him to know. And
Yeah.
so anyhow, so they bought a car, and then he drove through, he stopped and he picked up, he picked up one lady there in Poland, Marie Sinmeyer, or was Marie Kottman at the time. He picked her up. Of course, they paid a little bit for him to drive.
Yeah.
Then he picked up a Riddell lady just right up this road here, right up here where there used to be a house sitting on the corner. Picked her up, and then he picked up this Madge Englehart thing. So he picked up three girls, and then he took them to school, and that's how they paid for. And he did that every day. He took them back and forth to school. That's a story. That's one of the stories he told me. Just
Right. When I was young, we didn't really have much, but I was always a hard worker. Always out there as soon as I could to make money. But I remember having a car, and because my friends were always needing rides, but they never had gas money.
Yeah.
So in my head, the way I outsmarted it all was I took the seat out, the back seat.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2-door car. So they'd say, "Hey, Harbour, you give me a ride here and there?" I said, "Yeah, get in." "Well, there's no seat back there." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. You'll have to sit on the floor." And that kept most of them from bumming rides off of me, but not all. Some of them would just climb right in and make themselves at home. But yeah, I remember doing that.
Now, I rode the school bus 12 years to school. I never had now I did, once in a while I get to drive the pickup to school, but no, I didn't drive to school. I mean, Mom worked, she was a cook at the schools there for a good while, and then she went to work for the co-op, and then they had a car and a truck, and that was it. My sister didn't drive. Until she went to college, they got her a car then to drive over ISU with, but no, we didn't. I didn't have a car. I mean, if I wanted a car to drive, you go out and date. Yeah, I took their car or the pickup truck, and that was it. And I never questioned that. Yeah. I mean, I knew other kids went to school but I never questioned. I mean, my God, what her mom and dad put out, that's what was there. That's what was there, and that's, that's what I told the boys. They'd go out and buy a car, and I said, I never bought a car. I was trying to think of how old I was before I ever bought a car. Dad would go out and buy the car or a truck and because he said, "Hey, you need a," and I bought it. The first truck I ever had was a ton truck. Dad said, "We need another truck," and he went out and bought it. He went out and did the thing. The note was in my name, but Dad did he was the one that did the wheeling and dealing. I never did that stuff. I mean, Dad's the one that did it. And until Dad passed away, most of the time he was the one that did the wheeling and dealing. I mean, I didn't do that. I mean, if I knew something, he was the one that went and dealt with the people, because he was pretty hard nosed about stuff, and he could get a better deal than anybody could, I guess. And I never questioned that, Paul. I never questioned that at all. I mean, that was just the way things were.
How old were you when he passed?
I was 41. Mom passed away when I was 40, and Dad passed away next year. I was 41.
So it really wasn't that long ago.
No, it's 19 years ago from dad and 20 years from mom. Yeah, it wasn't. Man, no. So anyhow, that was I wasn't quite right in the thing because mom passed away in '94. That was 19 years ago, and dad passed away in '95, so that'd been 18 years. Yeah, 19 and 18 years ago. No, that just seems like yesterday too, Paul.
Yeah.
That's.
Well, I think when I was 21 when I moved up here, and it seems like it was just a year or two ago.
You lived in Tacoma, Washington? I mean, you was in.
Oh yeah, I lived in Germany and Mississippi and Missouri and Washington.
Your dad was in the Army or the?
Yeah. My biological dad was from Mississippi. He was a traveling salesman.
Mm-hmm.
He sold magazines.
Okay.
And during the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of money to be made off of that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess he ran a crew and did quite well with it.
Mm-hmm.
So in '74, I guess he and mom split up, and there's a lot of bad that went with that. But then when she married my dad or my stepdad, he was in the Army, so we traveled a lot.
Yeah. Well, you got to see a lot of the world then. Jeez.
Yeah.
Or was you pretty young when you were overseas, or?
Yes, I was 5 and 6 in Germany, 7 in Washington. We moved a lot in Missouri, but
You got in Fort Leonard Wood?
no, we were around DeSoto, Missouri then. But
Okay.
my family, there was 8 of us. My dad made good money, but there was 8 of us, so that equaled out to not much money.
Yeah.
And mom didn't work; she had all of us kids. But so we moved a lot, really. Changed schools a lot when I was younger. But and then I wound up here. They moved up here, and then I was driving an hour for a $6 an hour job in St. Louis. So I came up to visit them and got a job at Metal Industries, and it started at $12 an hour.
Oh my!
So that was an easy decision, and I moved up here, and then I've been here
You've
since.
been here ever since, yeah.
What year? 42 now.
What year was that you?
Well, I was 21.
21.
So 71.
Been 20 years.
92.
92. Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like it was just yesterday.
Yeah, it was one of the, and now this is another story, and it was when we went to school or Jackson, but at the time they were building Interstate 70, and I don't know if you know how that, but they would move a section, and they brought workers with them. I mean, there was people that just followed the road.
Yeah.
And this one family that you talk about kids moving in, we had kids come in and went to school here, and they was just there for a little while. And this one boy I remember in particular, his name was Eugene. I don't remember his last name. And I was in the 7th grade, and this just was always stuck with me, and I don't know why, but of course, they didn't have a lot, and they lived in a trailer court that was just right over here where Gary Nesty lives at now. There was a trailer court in there. And there was probably, 20, 30 trailers in there, but that was where the workers, their families were there. And Eugene had a brace on one leg. He had polio or something, and he had a brace on. But he was
Okay. All right, Doug. We're going again.
So anyhow, Eugene, he was a little bit bigger than this, and and you don't think of it at the time, but you can see that he'd probably been in a lot of different schools, being his dad and mom and family moved. And Eugene was, even though he had a brace on his leg, he could shoot, he could run and play basketball in the gym. He also chewed tobacco. Now this is over 7th grade school, but I remember he didn't come for a while, and it was getting close to Christmas time. And of course, back then you'd draw names and get a gift for somebody who was in your class. And I don't know whether I had Eugene's name, but we got a present, or he had a present there, and he didn't show up, and I'll never forget it because he came in there with his. They drove in a pickup truck, and it was snowing in the thing, spitting snow out the back. Eugene was in the back of that pickup truck because it was full. Family was in the front. It was just a one-seater, and he was in the back. had on them old Naugahyde jackets, those plastic that the kids had back then. And he came and he got his Christmas present. And then they drove out, and he was in the back of that pickup truck whenever they left. And I thought they were originally from West Virginia, is where they were from. And I've always wondered. He was a nice kid. I remember he had real wavy hair. Not real long, but I always wonder what happened to some of the kids. So.
Did he come back after
Christmas?
No.
He started in the fall. He started late, like in October, and by Christmas time they was ready to move on. They had finished the section, and so they just had to move. Where as the road moved on, they just kept moving west with it. So that's yeah.
You wonder. I had a kid when I was in 6th grade, and I drew her name, and for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a very poor family. We were out in the middle of nowhere. Well, it was 82, so it was the last recession besides the past one.
Oh, yeah.
And she wanted a pair of mittens, and I didn't want to get her the mittens. That's all she asked for, because we had to write a thing over what we wanted for Christmas. And but I didn't get them for her because I didn't want anybody to think that I liked her.
Oh.
You know how boys are.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those silly, dumb things that I regret.
Well,
even now as an adult, I think, man, I wish I just would have got her those mittens.
Yeah,
But I can't remember her name or anything.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember his last name. All I remember is his name was Eugene, and he was. We had, of course, one of the boys that thought he was the toughest one there in school, and of course he's been to jail now ever since then. But he and Eugene kind of butted heads there for a while. But Eugene being he was a little bit older, he come out on top. So it was yeah. But see, we did. Jackson Township was pretty isolated down there. We didn't get a lot of influx and outflux. It's not like when you were moving around the schools or a big city. We just didn't see a lot of that. Most of the kids were all the same. I mean, yeah, you knew some kids maybe had a little bit more than that, but most everybody was all on the same economic plane, really. I mean, back then, farmers, you made a living. That's what you did. It wasn't, farmers then farmed 150 acres, made a living off that, or 200, and that's what you did. And your mom maybe worked a job, or dad had a part-time job. It's totally different now.
How many acres do you farm altogether?
We farm right around 950 acres, yeah. And that keeps me busy. We did farm more than that. We had farmed about 1,400 acres, and that's whenever our oldest two boys, I thought they wanted to farm, and they had about over 400 acres of ground rented between them, and Matt was little at the time, and that was about 8 years ago. And I told Carolyn, I said, and they both were, and I said, no, we ain't killing ourselves for doing it. If they can't come home and help, we're not going to kill ourselves doing it. So I told the boys, I said, well, you're going to give up the ground, because I said, your mom and I aren't going to kill ourselves doing it. Yeah. And I don't think it's been a bad decision. So
yeah, Matt, he's into farming, isn't he?
I think Matt wants to stay around home. Now, see, you went to college and you want to stay around here, but many times people go to college, I guess they want to leave. They don't. It's too confining where they were raised at, or whatever. They want to see a bigger side of the world, and on you, on the other hand, you're wanting to see what everybody's did and where they came from, which is commendable, Paul. I like that.
Well, I have age that's helping me with that too.
Yeah.
If I was in the boat where I didn't have kids here, going to school here, boyfriends, girlfriends here, I'd be more inclined to maybe go see a bigger side.
Well,
But I'm rooted now. I always thought, well, if I'm gonna move, I better do it before Mercedes turns 14.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as she starts boyfriends, then I'm here forever. Not I'm here forever now.
Well, that's all. There's not a thing wrong with that. You can, what do they call it, blossom where you grow at. There's a lot to be said for that. So
What is it? All journeys, all roads lead back to home.
yeah.
It seems like you always wind up there. So you have around 900 acres, and we
Mhm.
know that two of the boys are, Kansas City and
Louisville. Jordan's in Louisville now. Yeah, he's a buyer for Texas Roadhouse. He's going to, Carolyn talked to him this morning, and he's going to go to Virginia to look at peanuts. The Texas Roadhouse, they have them peanuts that you eat before you go in. I've only been over there about 2 or 3 times. I don't know, but Carolyn said, you don't go to Georgia down there where Jimmy Carter, he says, no, he said, evidently the peanuts in Virginia are bigger and they like the bigger peanuts, which I didn't know that. But that's what he told her. And Chris, he's in Kansas City, and he's working for a company that buys and sells grain, DDGs and dried distilled grains, and corn and wheat and beans. And
with your farming, or just your lifetime overall, is there one thing that you can pinpoint that has maybe had more influence over your happiness than others? Because you've seen, you and Carolyn both. When I first met Carolyn 6 or 7 years ago, she's bubbly and joyful,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then when I met you a couple years ago, that's one of the first things I noticed is that you both seem just really happy and content.
Well, I think it's just, I think we enjoy each other. And one of the ministers that I think our faith has a lot to do with it. But one of our ministers, and it's always stuck with me. He said, God comes first, and he said, then your wife comes second. He said, that's number 2. He said, you got to make sure that's your buddy and that's your spouse. He said, your family's 3rd. And he said, your neighbors are 4th. And he said, 5th comes to church. He said that's, and that put a lot of things in perspective. Mm-hmm. That was, and he's probably about 90 years old now, Reverend Gettinger, but he'd been married 3 times. He's lost 2 wives. First one to cancer, and the second one, I don't know whether she died of cancer or not. And the 3rd lady he married is one he had in, her name's Sue, and she was, when he was a camp counselor, she was one of his student, or one of the kids. So, but he was. So yeah, your spouse is number 2, God's number 1, your wife's number 2, and don't forget it. So
that's pretty good advice.
Yeah.
I have to tell Jenny that. She'll agree with you.
Yeah. Our pastor down at Reverend Hayes, now he's been married 3 times. His first marriage ended in divorce, and only because, and they had a child, and he joined the Navy. He had been a carpenter for a couple of years out of high school, and then he joined the Navy, and she wouldn't go with him. She said no, she wasn't going to go, and then she divorced him, and then his second wife, she died of breast cancer. And then he wasn't going to get married again, but he met Angela over in Scotland, and they got married. So anyhow, that was. But he's a nice fellow. Reverend Haynes is. When I've been sick, he's been there. When we talked to him, and he's been there and talked with us, and yeah, he's a good egg. So. No, I was going to tell you the story about this came from my grandfather's Spelman too. Of course, he knew the fellows, but just right south of west of Center Point and north of Asheboro, Romases had a farm over there. It was Jim and Alice Romases. It was Jim's grandfather, and they were putting up hay, or they was either putting up hay or they were thrashing wheat. And there was a thunderstorm come up, and they shut down, and there was 4 men, and all 4 of them went into the barn.
Okay.
Just west of Center Point and north of Asheboro, the Romas had a farm, or they still have a farm there, and this was Jim Romas's grandfather. But and this was back in the teens, I guess, because they were, they did stuff with threshing machines, or they were putting hay up in the barn with, with the hay mow when they had the horses to put it in. I'm not sure exactly what they were doing, but it was in the summertime, and the storm came up, and these 4 guys, they got in there out of the lightning storm, and Jim's grandfather sat up on the hay mow with his feet off of the ground.
He sat up on the what?
The hay mow, where the cows would eat at the manger. He got up there on the manger part and had his feet off of the ground. He was inside the barn, and I don't know, hay mangers. Where the cows they put the hay down, and then the cows would go through, put their noses between 2 slats, and then pull the hay out to eat it. Yeah. And then most of the time they had a feed bunk along the front of it that they put ground feed too if they wanted corn or something for them. But anyhow, the lightning struck and killed the other 3 men because they were on the ground, and his grandfather was the only one living out of that. Yeah. And if you don't think that'd make a believer out of you.
Yeah, so it struck the ground?
Struck the ground, and by golly, or that barn, and it killed the other 3 men, and he was the only one alive.
Man.
Yeah. That was.
Have you had any close calls like that, farming, or have your?
Oh, I've had
lightning or anything?
Well, they're just. What was it there right before Labor Day? Carolyn and I, it was Sunday morning, because it had stormed that night. On Saturday night. Sunday morning, I went outside, and I went around to the front of the house, and Carolyn came through the other side there too. And she said, I smell smoke, wood smoke. And I said, I do too. I said, and it smells close too. And I said, I don't know where it's coming from. And I had walked around that way and didn't notice it. But anyhow, when I looked, lightning had struck that. I don't know, we had a great big tree out there, and that tree's gone now. But lightning had struck that tree, and it had burnt 16 feet up into that tree because it was hollow. And all it was holding it was about that thick of the tree. That tree was 4 foot through. And all it was holding it on the west side was about 8 inches, about a third of it. And we were going to go to church, and I said, I ain't going to church now. I said, if the wind come up right, it'd blow it right on the house. Yeah. And so I got the little tractor and the chainsaw, and she's got pictures on her phone, but anyhow, I put the bucket up and pressed against it and cut it and fell over that way. But that was as close as I've been to lightning. So, I mean, we knew it struck close, but I didn't know it had hit that tree. But, I mean, Paul, that tree was, I mean, all the ash from the inside of the tree was down there on the ground. And it was still... Oh, and it was still smoking. I mean, it was still burning. And I thought, geez Louise. And Carolyn said, how did you not walk around there and see that? I said, well, I wasn't looking for her. Yeah. I smelled it, but I wasn't looking for that tree to be burned. And then I just, whenever she said it too, and I looked around there, and that was unbelievable. No, I've had my friend Tom one time, we always used to ride on the fender of the tractor when I was a kid. And Tom Sturley was driving the tractor, and we was disking, and I don't know what happened. He popped the clutch on the tractor or something, and I went backwards. No, I went forwards, and he managed to stop the tractor, and I mean, the wheel was just that close to me. I mean, if he hadn't hit the brakes and the clutch at the right time, I'd have been run over. That was close.
I've heard stories when I was a kid, same thing. People riding on the fender to fall off and get run over.
Oh my! I rode in the fenders east Louise. That's how you learn. I mean, and I rode with Dad when I was, after Dean died, and I was 8 years old. Of course, I rode with Dean, but Dad got different tractors then that had a bigger fender on them, and that was a little bit because the older tractors had just a little narrow fender on them,
Yeah.
like that, and you only just kind of leaned up on the side of it, and of course they weren't that big. They weren't big like the tractors weren't big like they are now. I mean, they were smaller tractors. You've seen the older ones, and yeah.
I remember my neighbor had a tricycle tractor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so did a guy named Delbert Price, a farmer I worked for. But in Missouri, your farmers are more livestock farmers. At least where I was.
Yeah.
They didn't have the big fields, so
They had a lot of
raise cattle and, and hogs.
Yeah.
And my job working for them would be to help them with the animals and to run fence and to split wood.
Mm-hmm.
Which of all that, the animals took maybe 10% of the time. Didn't really take much, especially not cattle.
Yeah.
They just didn't need anything unless you were loading them to go somewhere.
Yeah.
But so I was running fence and cutting wood all the time. But one of the farmers, a couple of them had those little tricycle tractors, and and I hated those. I watched a couple of them go over, and then I was just always leery of them.
You want to stop at? I'm going to